Hello, my name is Linda, also known as Torta Jala around the internet, and I love creative journaling and all things stationery. And today I wanted to share some fountain pen ink musings with you, and perhaps you are an expert and you can enlighten me. But all of these thoughts sort of started out back in December when I was going through the Diamine Inkvent calendar. And there were quite a few of inks that were labeled as extreme sheen. They look very, very cool. And of course, I am a beginner, so this is all new to me. I'm still learning. But sheening inks, they do seem to be a bit more complicated to handle and use on a daily basis, perhaps. So, the basic definition is that a sheening ink is a fountain pen ink that shows two tones when it is dry. So you'll have like a base color, but then there'll be like sort of a shiny, almost metallic like kind of sheen on top so that you get that very cool two toned effect. It's definitely really interesting and it makes it fun to like play around and swatch your inks. I can definitely appreciate the fact that there are sheening inks, but when you try some of these inks in pens, sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to clean them out after the fact if the sheening is like really dramatic. And I have found that sheening inks can sometimes be almost distracting, like in writing, because it's like so shiny, shiny. Um, so yeah, there is just a bit more care needed when you're using like sheening inks, perhaps, similar to like shimmer inks, right? But I've also had the experience of sometimes if like my hand is damp and I place it on top of like a sheening ink that I've already, written with, sometimes it could like reactivate and lift off. But it also depends on the ink. Like it doesn't happen to all of them. So I don't know. I think it just depends on the paper and the formula of the ink, all of that kind of stuff. All to say that I just don't think that sheening inks are intriguing enough for me to want to use them all the time. Maybe it's just not my thing. However, someone told me that if I add water to the ink, it would make it not sheen. So there's something about the dilution of the dye like particles in the ink. So I suppose you could use your sheening inks just slightly diluted with water and then it won't sheen anymore and it'll just be the base color. Or you could use it for painting purposes, sort of like watercolor. So if you add water, it's also probably not going to show that sheen very much. And of course, there are people who like to mix their inks, and it seems a bit like a chemistry experiment, but another sort of option if you don't want to use sheening inks like in your pens. So I just realized that different papers, different pens, even the weather can sometimes really affect how the ink will behave and how much sheening will show up. And different sheening inks from like different companies, different formulas, they are definitely not made equally. So I've shared before that I bought some notebooks from Boz Notebooks on Etsy, and it's labeled as Tomoe River paper, but it is the cream color. So I don't know the specifics of the batches and what machines made the Tomoe River paper, but it's clear that Tomoe River paper is just not what it used to be. And so even if something says it's Tomoe River paper, it doesn't mean that it's going to perform the same across the board. I think the days of when someone could claim like, "Oh, this is Tomoe River, it's really good for fountain pens," that those days are just gone because there's too much variation now and you just sort of never know exactly how it's going to perform until you try it. And so maybe because this is cream colored Tomoe River paper, it definitely behaves differently from any of the other Tomoe River paper that I have that is white. Um, some inks seem to feather on it and some do not. And one thing I noticed is when it comes to sheening inks, they do not sheen on this paper. So I've swatched Diamine Sleigh Ride and Diamine Cranberry on a whole bunch of different papers. And so you can see the differences here. Diamine Sleigh Ride is actually labeled as an extreme ink, so you expect it to sheen. And Cranberry is actually labeled as standard. However, when everyone was swatching it, like during the ink vent calendar, it showed sheening effects, and everyone was like, whoa, what's going on here? And I suppose this can happen. Some inks that aren't traditionally attributed to having sheen, for example, I see sheen in like my writer's blood and my Pilot Iroshizuku Yamabudo if I'm doing like big swatches or have like more ink on the page. When I just write with them, I usually don't see the sheening. So obviously the paper, the nib, the pen, like the situation can really affect what you see um, as the end result. I've also noticed that if ink evaporates a bit, like maybe you've left it in a pen for too long, or for whatever reason, the water content sort of goes away, then there's also another possibility that you will see sheening because I suppose there's just more dye particles, and if they remain on the top, sometimes they can create that sheening effect. Um, so yeah, I think that we all know that so many factors contribute to how an ink looks uh, as the end product. And so, different people, different situations, it's all a unique experience. And maybe that's why playing with fountain pen inks and our pens can be so fun, right? So, just to show you a closer look, here, this is the Hobonichi 2023 A6 Techo. So it has the older, quote unquote, good Tomoe River paper. And you can clearly see that both inks have sheen. The Diamine Sleigh Ride and Diamine Cranberry. But the Boz Notebooks cream color Tomoe River paper, it does not show sheen. Even when I'm like, trying to saturate with lots of ink on the page, like a big swatch to see if the sheen will show up. Maybe like a slight, little bit of sheen on the edges, but really it doesn't show sheen. And I have tried it with different inks as well, and same issue. This cream colored Tomoe River paper seems to possibly feather with certain inks, and I think it just absorbs the ink in a completely different way, and that is why you don't see the sheen. Now, I did do the same swatches, Diamine Sleigh Ride and Diamine Cranberry, on moleskin paper, which is also cream colored, and Clairefontaine paper, which is white. And you can see even on these, papers, like especially the moleskin, which is usually considered really inferior. It, definitely absorbs the ink, but it shows a little bit of sheen. Like it's not really horrible. I guess have like a good moleskin notebook here. But on the Clairefontaine, it is white paper, and you can clearly see that there is some sheen. So it's really interesting that Diamine Cranberry, that was labeled as a standard ink, sheens so much on so many different papers. But this cream colored Tomoe River paper that I got from Etsy just sort of like absorbs the ink so much that there's barely any sheen, even or no sheen, especially even on papers that are labeled as sheening or extremely sheening, right? So just very interesting, all the differences and puzzling a little bit as well. I'm realizing more and more that the ink and paper, they just make such a difference, and probably the weather as well. Just so many variations and variables that can change the situation. And that's also maybe why fountain pen people like us get a little bit obsessed with finding like the perfect paper because we want something that will work for us personally, right? Where we get to see um, or I guess that we know our paper so well that the results are not a surprise, like they're expected. But what I have learned is that just because it says Tomoe River paper doesn't mean that it's going to perform like in the olden days, where Tomoe River paper really works well with fountain pen inks and shows like all the properties. So, to Sheen or not to Sheen? That is the question, right? Please let me know down in the comments. Do you like sheening inks? Do you use them? Do you find that there are negative attributes that makes you not use them, like the way that I sort of, I don't know, I shy away from them, and I guess I just haven't um, figured out how I would like to use them? What's your experience? And let me know if you've noticed these differences in regards to papers, if it sheens or it doesn't sheen, if it's supposed to sheen and it doesn't sheen, or something that is not labeled as sheening and it actually sheens, which is crazy, right? So I just happened to end up with quite a few sheening inks because of the Diamine Ink Vent calendar. It's not because I bought them, knowing that they sheen. So I'm just sort of trying to brainstorm and think about how I would use those inks because I don't really enjoy writing long form with them, with like the, metallic shininess. So that's that. Thanks so much for watching my video. I really appreciate you being here. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. And if you want to see more stationery videos, please subscribe. I wish you a lovely day, and until next time, bye.